Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. In this tutorial, I'll teach you how to color scales using the Color Therapy app. In this video, I'll cover how to color scales on a pangolin. You can also use these steps to color dragon scales or other armored animals like snakes or even turtles. You can find this image by searching pangolin in the search box. So I wanted to show you an example of what's possible in the app. So for this template, you can actually add so much detail. You just take the time and spend the time to shade and add the highlights. And I did pull one up also so you could just see there's lots of texture in the scales. Each one has a little bit of these lines going across it. And then we have the highlights from the sun and then some really strong shadows as well. So let's first start off with a foundation color. So under the autumn palette, let's set that to gradient, and I'm going to use the second color on the second row, sort of a gradient light brown. And I'll set that gradient from light to dark at the top down to the bottom. And I'm just going to tap to fill in the entire pangolin that way first. So just setting a foundation for all of our highlights and lowlights. Now let's start off by adding a little bit of texture to the scales. Now go under the brown 2 palette and this time set it to solid. And I'm going to use sort of a medium to dark brown, so I'll choose the 5th color on the second row. Now go under your manual mode and select the oil tool. Set the size to 10 and the opacity at 20. Now make sure coloring inside the lines mode is set to on and then zoom in to one of your scales. Now with your finger, just start to make horizontal lines going across and curving across those scales, and some of them can overlap a little bit too. This is one great thing about the oil tool is that it has a bit of texture in the strokes and the layering looks really nice with it too. So this helps to make the scales look sort of ribbed. Now I am making sure that the tips of the scales are left a little bit lighter and it's going to be a bit darker towards the end of the scales. Now let's add a few more of those horizontal lines, but with the darker color. So I'm going to use the first color on the second row and just add it. And this time I'm really just going to focus on the bottom of the scales where they're being overlapped, because that's where it's going to be the darkest. So just add a few more lines there. Now let's add some vertical lines. Let's select on the bottom row, there's sort of a yellowish cream color on that palette. Now let's go over to the pen tool, set the size to 1 and opacity at 30. Now just draw some vertical lines coming down on the scales from the tip all the way down to the bottom in rows. And you also want to make sure you continue to curve those lines. So apply that to all the scales. And these don't have to be perfect. We're just applying texture, building up those layers. Now let's add our shadows. Go back to the oil tool, set the size to 1 and opacity at 60. Now let's use an even darker brown. So under the brown 2 palette again, let's just use that second color on the top row. Now let's imagine that the sun is shining down from the top right side of the scales. So if we zoom in, all of our shadows are going to be on the left side. So with your finger, add shadows on all of the left sides of the scales that are overlapping. And you can do a couple layers if needed. And then with the basic black, do the same thing again, just focus even more on those edges. So we're just darkening those shadows even more. Now let's add in our highlights. Switch back to that creamish yellow color and still using the oil tool, just start to add in highlights on the tips of those scales and focus more on the right side, just making the right side a little bit thicker since the sun is coming from the right side. And lastly, let's go into the beige palette and just select the lightest color there. And we're just going to add in just a little touch here and there of an even brighter highlight. And I'm focusing on the middle top of the tip as well as the right side again. I'm kind of bringing down the highlight just a tiny bit down into the middle of the scale. Here's the final product with extra shading on the bottom of the pangolin. If you're coloring a dragon, check out my other tutorial on how to color dragon eyes. If you'd like to see more tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Color Therapy YouTube channel so you don't miss any new tutorial videos. Thanks for watching our tutorial. You can get the Color Therapy app for free on the App Store.